Mirror, mirror on the wall, whose box office receipts are about to fall? Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, a fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today I'm here once again to give my parking lot playback. Yes, a relatively empty parking lot, but yes, it is still a parking lot playback today. And of course, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the newest and long-awaited Disney adaptation / reimagining of Snow White, directed by Marc Webb and starring Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot, and Burnap, among others. Story-wise, of course, this is a reimagining of the 1937 animated film, the first animated feature film in history, which in turn is adapted from the 1812 German fairy tale. And what's funny is, I actually remember when Snow White and the Seven Dwarves was released on VHS as a new movie. And it's the same way that I thought that Whitney Houston was a new artist when she debuted with The Bodyguard. So, depending on your age, that is your general introduction. But yes, as far as I knew, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves was a new film. And that was my first introduction to it. I literally remember the mall in Maryville, Indiana, and my mom, my sister, and I were walking through, and I saw the display of the VHSs of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and I was just like, oh, okay, cool. I'm out. And I think it was my sister who had to grab that and put it back yeah, no. You just can't be grabbing stuff and walking off with it. But yeah, that's how excited I was. I was like, oh, cool. I couldn't have been any more than, 2 or 3, so very, very young. Believe me, in no other sense of my life have I had the ideation to just walk past a store and snatch stuff. So, there's that. So, as far as my pros, I'm going to start with our director. As I mentioned, this film is directed by Marc Webb. He has previously directed the films 500 Days of Summer, which was his feature directorial debut, as well as The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I have seen none of those films, so I can't necessarily speak to his style as a director. And I know even when it comes to films like this, we have the Disney machine at work here, so there's only so much direction you can do that isn't going to be overridden in some way or influenced by that machine. So that's kind of one of those things where I'm just like, it's fine. I have to say it's not nearly as horrible as I thought. I came in, ready to drag, and I was kind of like, oh, well, yeah, that's not, okay. I'll be honest, nowhere close to my irritation, frustration, any of that stuff that I felt for the films that I watched in 2024. No. And I'm shocked, even in a film that I figured would be pretty lackluster and pretty weak, I actually found some enjoyment there. So again, I don't know if it's the, enigma that is 2025, but I'm telling you, this film is definitely another arguably soulless Disney remake or adaptation that no one asked for, but Disney is going to ride that to the rails fall off, so that's fine. I'm used to it at this point. We literally got the trailer for Lilo and Stitch inside, which I didn't look at because I might react to it later, but I was just like, there's always another one, and then we're going to have one for Moana, even though Moana just came out, the animated version and the sequel just came out not that long ago. So yeah, it's the whole thing. But I will say that, yeah, I think it was a lot more entertaining and enjoyable than I thought it would be. I'm honestly shocked to say that. I can't believe I'm saying that. Naturally, it was nice hearing some of the original songs like Hi Ho, Whistle While You Work, and others. And I will say that although I am someone who is not really keen on new songs being involved, even when they're good, like with Beauty and the Beast, I think Evermore is a great song. Do I think it's better than If I Can't Love Her from the Broadway musical? Not quite, but it's still good. You know what I'm saying? So it can be very dicey, especially when you're used to what's been done on Broadway or what's been done with the original source material, original film, whatever. I kind of was surprised at how many songs were featured, and I may have more to say about that in a minute. But yeah, I just think for the most part, this was something that was trying to expand the original story. And I think despite the commentary and the perception of this being like a, I don't know, possibly an anti-male situation, or Snow White is some type of, I don't know, Mary Sue, or she doesn't need help from the prince, or whatever male character, that's not what happens here. So, I mean, that's not even something I went in necessarily thinking that. Maybe her commentary, Rachel Zegler's commentary, made people think that, but that's not really what's happening here. If anything, it gives more depth and dimension to Snow White and the prince's, so to speak, relationship in this film. And despite the simplicity of the original story and the original film, I actually like some of the choices that were made as far as expanding the story. It's still different, not all of it works, but I liked some of the choices story-wise that were added here. So, with all that being said, I'm going to jump over to my cons. And although I don't have as nearly as many as I thought I would, there's still quite a few that have to be discussed. First and foremost, there is no denying that Sandy Powell is a top-tier, legendary costume designer, okay? She also worked on the film Cinderella, and I think we can all agree that that was next level costume design. Not just Cinderella's dress, which is really its own thing, but all the rest of the looks there at the ball, Lady Tremaine, so on and so forth, like, impeccable. I don't expect necessarily a film like this to have that same kind of style, because it's a very different story, very different aesthetic. That being said, this styling for Snow White, I don't know what I don't know what's going on here. I really don't. I mentioned it in my trailer reaction, and you can check that out if you so choose. Even in that, I was kind of like, this looks so off. And I kind of figured, well, maybe it's not going to look as bad. It's a trailer. Maybe some of these other shots, it'll look... No. It actually looked a lot worse. It was just like, I don't know who came up with the silhouette for her dress. I don't know who came up with these colors for the dress. And especially, and I said this before, but this bob. This whole Lord Farquaad setup, it's a no for me, dog. Unacceptable. Like, every time I looked at it, I was just like, if you know, then you know.
And you have a bob, and I can't. What's wrong with a bob? Something.
What is wrong with the bob?
Your bob don't look like hers. Hers is tight. You're supposed to wear them straight. And she has
Wait,
hers.
now, she made her bob now. No, she folded it up.
She had it completely folded under.
Yeah, it was bad. And then I think outside of the styling of the hair, it also looked like a pretty bad wig. In a lot of the scenes. And I don't know anything about, women and wigs, but maybe it's because I have, my mom and family members and friends who are women, but I could at least tell from time to time when something just doesn't look quite right. I said something very similar about that trifling wig at the beginning of Furiosa, and this isn't much better. I'm just like, all this money, the budget for this, and it is so wild to me that even cosplayers with a limited budget can make something that looks on point. I know some of them do invest a good amount of money, but there are some people who don't even have that much money, and they can make something that looks stunning. And they had all this money, and her entire look was just, no. It was weak. It was just not good. I'm not gonna lie to you. And speaking of Gal Gadot,
see, unlike you, I know her.
I think you mean new.
Okay, great gowns, beautiful gowns.
look, we all are blessed with different gifts. Some excel within those gifts, and some do not. And all I'm going to say is, Gal singing and acting in this film, a film that was just released after she just received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You know what? I'm not going to say it. I'm not even going to go there, but I think you guys might be picking up what I'm putting down. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of adding on new music. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I do think there are a couple of numbers that worked here, but a lot of them weren't really needed. And I think also this leans so far into being a musical, and I don't think it necessarily needs that, because even the original animated film, there's music, but I didn't feel like it was like constant. This film like hits you with back-to-back numbers, and listen, nobody appreciates a musical more than me. Not every musical, but I can enjoy a musical. I think they OD'd on the music. There are quite a few that's just like, look, we could have just had some dialogue here. And I'll even say Cinderella, you know, the adaptation from 2015, even that film, you know, even though there's original music there that they recorded, they didn't use it. But, you know, even the music there would have been, you know, relatively sparse. But here it was just like number and then another number and then another number. And I was like, all right, can we get a minute to just, you know, talk and enjoy what's going on? Yeah, that didn't work for me either. And I just think as a whole, the CGI, the whole vibe, the whole look is just so artificial and off-putting. And the thing is, this is drawing from a world that is animated, but even Snow White, you know, for it to be an animated film, it's very realistic with its colors and its color palette, and, you know, it's very grounded. So this film taking such a highly saturated, overly animated, green screen, CGI everywhere, I just don't think that was the right move. And the CGI animals absolutely drove me insane. I was just like, I understand. I don't think you want to train, you know, just snatch animals or have squirrels and rabbits, you know, training them to do things. You know, I get that, but I just, I'm telling you, and in that whole part where the deer comes out of the woods with the glowing eyes, I didn't know what was scarier, like the glowing eyes or when it actually appeared and it was a deer. I was just like, what is this? And the same thing with the dwarves. On the one hand, it's very uncanny valley. It's very off-putting. It's very kind of like, In a way, it works after a certain point, because I guess you get used to it. I think once your eyes just kind of adjust and you get used to, you know, just kind of the unnatural vibe of it and go with it, it's kind of fine. And I did like the characterization and the voice performances. I did enjoy that. However, I just think like we couldn't have gotten people of that stature, little people, I hope that's the correct term, but I don't understand why we couldn't just have done that. That's 7 roles that could have gone to 7 actors. You know what I'm saying? So that to me, not just because of how it looks in the film, but just the bigger picture and even the optics of it, I don't like it. So when it comes down to it, I think that much like The Little Mermaid, despite all the drama and the hoopla and the controversy, all this boils down to a film that's okay. It's not terrible. It's not great. But in the end, this isn't going to harm anybody, and everyone will move on to the next, you know, film that they're going to get upset about. So it is what it is. And I do think, again, do I understand some of the complaints here, and do I agree with some of it? Yes. Do I think some of it is a little overblown and overdramatic? Yes. When it comes down to it, this is a film that's fine. There's been better. There's certainly been worse. Much like The Little Mermaid, it's fine. And at this point, I'm fine with it being fine. Now, the box office receipts might be saying something very different, because that theater was empty. But again, that's not money out of my pocket. I'm just here to give my review and keep it pushing. I've given my review, so it's time to keep it pushing. Oh, yeah. Once again, this is Movieman signing off, and I'll see you, yes, at the movies.